And we are now less than 1 month away from the NFL draft, and I feel like every week heading into our mock drafts, we're having to adjust to these major deals going down in the NFL. Amanda Garrett, Brady, Quinn, we have Danny Kanell, and the guy behind the mock drafts, Ryan Wilson here. Let's start at the top, guys. Aiden Hutchinson to the Jags, Brady.
I mean, Ryan, is this ever going to change, or we just sticking with Aiden Hutchinson? You do about 40,000 of these. I'm hoping at one point we switch it up a little bit. Maybe someone trades up to take a quarterback. Can we play out that scenario, or are you just afraid of people on social media and online giving you a hard time about putting out some of those scenarios? I mean, you've done enough of these. Can we get something else to talk about every single week for these mock drafts, Ryan?
Hey, listen, you got to blame Trent Baalke and Doug Peterson because from January 31st until last week, I had them taking an offensive lineman. So I blame Doug, I blame Trent because it was Aiden Hutchinson for the longest time, and it does feel like Groundhog Day, I'm with you. And then for a 4 or 5 week stretch, we had a little break there with Ike Ekwonu and maybe even an Evan Neal in there, but we're back to Aiden Hutchinson. Look, I am afraid of social media, I'll be honest with you, so I'm not going to have someone trade for a quarterback. But I would like to see the scenario where someone moves up, and I want to know what they're moving up for because Aiden Hutchinson feels like the cleanest prospect in this class, and that seems pretty clear as we're at this point in the process. But again, you could talk me into perhaps an offensive lineman for the Jaguars because even though they signed Brandon Scherf, even though they re-upped Cam Robinson, you could never have enough protection for a young quarterback who took so many hits last year.
Yeah, I think this feels to me like the safe pick for Jacksonville. The offensive linemen that we've discussed, whether it was Evan Neal or Ike Ekwonu, who we're going to get to in a little bit, it feels like there's not as much consensus. But with Kayvon Thibodeau dropping off, it seems like Aiden Hutchinson just filled that gap. So, and it's not, I don't think it's a bad thing. I just think it's one of those things where most people agree he's the best pass rusher available in this draft. Comes from a good family, works hard, has a high motor. And as much as we talk about did he tap out there, I still think there's a pretty good base to work with. So I think this is a pretty good, safe pick for Jacksonville to make if they do indeed end up going with Aiden Hutchinson.
I mean, look what they've done this offseason so far. They're basically trying to, turn over this roster as fast as possible. They've done that via trades, free agent signings, all of that. And they're trying to fill this roster with what they believe to be good players. Aiden Hutchinson is a player at the next level who's going to be able to be an immediate impact player, a starter right away, who's going to force the football out of the hands of all those other quarterbacks within the division. So it makes a lot of sense. Ryan, I'm joking with you right now only because we have to do this so often, and from time to time, it does get a little boring.
And I mean, Chris and I split it up. You're up here for a whole hour. Oh my gosh, Brady. I will say we do have trades in this one. I meant to mention that at the top. So that is exciting because there's a good one coming up. All right, let's go to the Lions with the second overall pick. Ryan, you have taking Georgia's Trayvon Walker. This isn't a massive jump. It was enough where I don't remember seeing him this high. Last week you had him going 7th overall to the Giants. So walk me through this one.
No, you're right. He hasn't gone this high in my mock drafts. He is a popular name among the draft Twitter folks, and he's a popular name in the league as well. The issue when you watched him at Georgia is that he was playing with so many other first-rounders and second-rounders on that defensive line, whether Jordan Davis or Devonta Wyatt or Channing Tindall at linebacker, Nakobe Dean, Quay Walker. The names go on. It was hard to figure out exactly what he was contributing and how good he was. And then we saw him test at the combine, ran a 4.51, and he just was off the charts in terms of everything he did in the measurables. He's 6'4", he's 275, and he moves like he's an off-ball linebacker. So I think there's going to continue to be a push to see him go inside the top 5. And the best football for him is actually ahead of him. It sounds like a cliche, but as I mentioned, he almost got lost at times on that Georgia defense, but that doesn't take away from the fact that he was a really good football player and moved so incredibly well for his size that it's hard not to fall in love with what he could project to be down the road, even if you didn't see it play in and play out. And that said, you saw a lot play in and play out that made you really excited about what type of football player he was last season and what he could end up being in the future in the NFL.
Hey, DK, I know he's not weighing in on this one, but I'm going to use something we talked about the other day. It's upside, upside, upside. That's Trayvon Walker here. And if you look at really what he's capable of, I think as an edge rusher, you can move him down inside. He's so versatile. He's really just tapping into, I think, his overall ability based on what we saw at Georgia and what it can be at the next level. And we just showed that chart of just his rise. And really, I remember traveling throughout the course of the season, talking to scouts, talking to front office executives. And one of the things that kept coming up was Trayvon Walker. And they kept almost trying to keep it a secret, which usually those secrets get out once you go to the combine, once you see a guy enough on tape. Once guys have a few drinks at the combine, they start kind of opening their mouths, talking a little too much. But you talked about just his kind of rise. Look, before the season started, we didn't look at him necessarily as a first-round pick. We're here now, and there's some reports people talking about he might be the first overall pick. That's how high his stock has risen so far. Ryan, did you contemplate that at all as far as maybe putting Walker at number 1, or have you contemplated in past weeks?
I did, only because I thought that you might give me some pushback about seeing Aiden Hutchinson's name at the top, and that will be something that I'll consider going forward. But legitimately, you're right. There has been murmurings that perhaps he ends up going first overall. That obviously will affect the betting markets, which has become a big part of the draft process, too, for a lot of people. But again, to your point, Brady, NFL teams have known about him for a while, especially the area scouts, and then the GMs and the personnel guys get involved as you get into January and February, and then word starts to leak out, and the media start to catch up. So it'll be interesting to see how this ends up. But I think it's a story of a guy who was really good on a really good football team and sort of got lost, maybe in the same way that Jamin Davis, we didn't really find out about in the media until the last 6 weeks or so. And obviously he ended up going in the first round to Washington last year.
Let's go to the Texans at 3. They have now officially moved on from Deshaun Watson, which means they now have 5 picks in the first 80 of them. Danny, you mentioned this guy, first one to the Texans, Ike Ekwonu, according to Ryan.
Yeah, I like this player. It's a solid player. You mentioned Houston. They have so many holes to fill. But I think if you build from the inside out and sort up that offensive line, whoever they end up going with the quarterback is going to be a huge help. And I think Ike Ekwonu is the perfect guy to do it. He's versatile and he's athletic. I mean, I think, he's played left tackle. He's played left guard. He was one of the first freshman linemen to start at NC State in over a decade. Both his parents were incredible athletes. His dad played college basketball. He's got a high IQ. He's a very smart player. He's an exceptional run blocker. His pass blocking needs to improve somewhat, but I think with the athleticism, the fact that he's moved around the offensive line has really alleviated some of those concerns, saying, all right, we can develop this player. We can see the potential, where I think he'd be a Pro Bowl type player within a few years. I think he's that good. He'd come in, put him in the right system, allow him to develop. He'll be a Pro Bowl type player.
All right, let's go on to the Jets. They have 2 top 10 picks. I will say, I mentioned trades. Keep an eye on the second one. But, Ryan, right now you have them taking Cincy corner Ahmad Gardner.
Yeah, Sauce Gardner out of Cincinnati, and they could take Evan Neal here. They signed Laken Tomlinson in the offseason. The hope, of course, that Mekhi Becton can come back and be a dominant left tackle. They drafted Elijah Vera Tucker last year. So given all that, I decided to go with Sauce Gardner here because he's the best cornerback in this draft class, and they need some help on the back end. As we sit here, they have Justin Hardy, Bryce Hall, and Michael Carter as sort of their best cornerbacks on that Jets secondary, and you would like to upgrade that and want to upgrade it with someone like Sauce Gardner, who is long, who is fast, who got a lot stronger over the course of the 2021 season, and you saw it. And I know Brady's favorite stat is he never gave up a touchdown over the course of his career, which is certainly noteworthy. He didn't play in the SEC, but he played in a lot of big games, even including last year. And I love how he has progressed throughout his career, getting better each and every year. And I talk to teams that without a doubt think he's the top cornerback in this class ahead of Derek Stingley. And sometimes the response you get is he's at least on the field. We only saw Stingley last year for 3 games, so I think Ahmad Gardner and that Robert Saleh defense is something that I would like to see, and maybe Zach Wilson wants a playmaker on the other side of the ball, but I don't know. We'll have to see how the rest of this draft plays out. Maybe he gets that.
Ryan mentioned Evan Neal. If he was there, it would be hard to pass on him. We find him going 5 overall to the Giants. They tried to make some moves on the offensive line, but Ryan says, look, they still need some help.
Yeah, they need some help. I mean, that's been one group they really haven't been able to figure out. John Mayer admitted so after the season, said, look, we've done everything we can to have messed up Daniel Jones' experience so far in the NFL. So shoring up the offensive line makes a lot of sense. Nate Solder, their right tackle, he's a free agent, so it'd make a natural fit given the versatility of Evan Neal, who can play really both sides of the offensive line. You draft him here, you plug him in, and he's a starter right away. He reminds me a lot of Tristan Wirfs, I think, and granted, we got stolen from us the opportunity to really see what he was going to test and look like at the Combine. He didn't do everything, but he's got that sort of freakish power, strength, athleticism, everything that you're looking for. So if you're the New York Giants, you're looking for a building block up front, Evan Neal would be the play here at number 5.
At 6, we find our first quarterback going off the board in Liberty's Malik Willis to the Panthers. I will say the Panthers GM came out either today or yesterday and said, look, we're not ruling out Cam Newton for another year, but the quarterback, well, Danny Kanell, it is dry right now. What do you think about Malik Willis to the Panthers at 6?
So I have been, you know this, Amanda, we've talked a lot. We've done a lot of these mock drafts. I've been a Kenny Pickett guy, but I am actually a Malik Willis guy. I'm moving him to the top of my board. In large part, here's why. I don't love this quarterback class. It's been pretty well documented. I don't think there's any guy that really lights it up. There's no surefire number 1 overall pick. But if you're going to invest this type of draft capital and financial commitment to a quarterback, I want to see big return. And I think with Kenny Pickett, I think it's a safe play, but I think the upside is limited with what you could get over the long haul. With Malik Willis, if you hit on him, if you surround him with the right talent, if you put him in the right system, if you get the type of development that you hope to get from him, I think you could hit a home run with him. So I think there's also a risk, though. You could see a player that could struggle to transition from playing at Liberty into the NFL. And I've told you guys this a couple times. I think he's sort of a hybrid between Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen. The only problem is he's not the best of either one. He's like a little bit less than Josh Allen with the arm strength, and he's a little bit less than Lamar Jackson with the running capability, but he is sort of a hybrid of those two athletes. But I do think if you put him in the right system, build around him, let him utilize his legs, he could be a home run. But I am concerned about Carolina, where he's going with all the uncertainty, new offensive coordinator, coaching staff on the hot seat. I don't love the fit for him in Carolina.
Yeah, I think that's the problem here. And now they could very well go this route where they draft a rookie quarterback in the top 10. Sometimes the philosophy or the logic to it is, hey, if you're a head coach on the hot seat, draft a rookie, you play him, you see how things go, and maybe it buys you another year. The hard part is there's too many examples of times when coaches have done that, and they end up getting fired when it was all said and done. Jeff Fisher with Jared Goff in his first year ended up getting fired at the end of it. You go back to John Fox and Mitchell Trubisky in Chicago, there's plenty of examples. That's just a couple. So the reality is, if you're looking at this decision, it makes some sense because, well, they went with Teddy Bridgewater, a veteran before in year 1. That didn't work. They went with Sam Darnold last year. Kind of a veteran of sorts, still on his rookie deal, but that didn't work. Now they maybe go back into the draft, but does Matt Rule really have time to make it work? I don't know. And so for all the reasons that DK just talked about, Ryan, it's concerning for me because I do think he's going to have to play right away. Now, if Christian McCaffrey's still there, that takes some pressure off your shoulders. They do have a defense that's improved, that I think can hold down scoring so he doesn't have to be Superman out there like Cam Newton once was for Carolina. So I can see it making some sense. It's just a tough spot for a rookie quarterback to be in.
Here's what I love most about this conversation. Danny and Brady know quarterbacks better than anyone, and Danny's already talked himself out of Kenny Pickett and into Malik Willis. This is what NFL teams are doing because they have so much time to think about it. If Danny had to make the draft pick in January, he's taking Kenny Pickett. Just like these GMs and front office guys are sitting in these draft rooms and they're having 6 to 8 weeks to think about this. I'm like, you know what? Malik Willis does have higher upside, so maybe we should go in that direction. I think all the points Danny made are fair ones. I'm not a huge Kenny Pickett guy, and I think the upside on Malik is such that you want to take that gamble. If you're going to gamble on a quarterback, you want to be an athletic quarterback to do the things that they do in today's NFL. Sometimes you get Mr. Trubisky, sometimes you get Josh Allen, and you hope you get closer to Josh Allen than Mr. Trubisky if you're the Panthers. But to your point, Brady, the offensive line is in such disarray that I don't know what would have to happen for Malik Willis to have a successful season next year as that team is currently constituted. So those are the issues, and they painted themselves in the corner, the Panthers did, by not getting any quarterback during the free agency / trading period. So they're stuck with the number 6 pick, and the quarterback is probably going to have to be the choice there, even though their offensive lineman available. Also, shout out to Matt Rule for his third grade outfit that he wore there for the coach's picture. I don't know if that instills confidence in any quarterback going there, but I love the fact that he was dressed up like he was first day of school. That was pretty awesome.
Well, and he was also standing like it, right? Like in the front, like he really didn't want to be there, but here I am. Okay, let's go to the Giants. Their second pick in the top 10. Number 5, they took Alabama offensive lineman Evan Neal. At number 10, the Brady Quinn Fighting Irish safety Kyle Hamilton. That's just their name now.
Well, I think they're number 7.
7,
one, right?
10,
Yeah. Unless there's a trade I was unaware of, which maybe could have taken place. Nonetheless, though, good pick.
Combo.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, I think, given his skill set, given what we saw on tape. He's the best safety in this draft class, one of the top overall prospects. And Don Martindale is taking over as their defensive coordinator. He likes to utilize exotic blitz packages with a lot of defensive backs on the field. And where Kyle Hamilton comes into play here is his versatility within that blitz scheme, but also the cover scheme and the ability to go up, make tackles, stop the run, or be able to make tackles out in space as teams start to utilize more spread formation. So he really fits everything that I think the Giants defense would be looking for in this case. Talked about Aiden Hutchinson at number 1 being a safe pick. This is another one in my opinion. You don't find guys with this sort of size, ability, range that can do everything that a safety is going to be asked to do in Don Martindale's system with the New York Giants, let alone in the NFL. So makes a lot of sense given the defensive scheme. Not necessarily the most biggest need for the Giants, but a lot of teams, when they get to this point, they're going to draft based on where they have these guys ranked, and he's too good of a prospect not to take him at this point.
All right, let's go to the Falcons at 8, and we do find another quarterback off the board. No Matt Ryan. They have Marcus Mariota. Where are you on the Kenny Pickett, Malik Willis? Because he has Kenny Pickett going to the Falcons.
I still trust the tape. I still have Kenny Pickett, to me, as based on what he did last year in the tape that I've watched. He's the best quarterback in this draft class. Now, that doesn't mean that it's going to work out the same for him. I still think Trevor Lawrence, for example, was the best quarterback draft class a couple of years ago. Now, he didn't have a great rookie season. Ryan Wilson would tell you Mac Jones was better. The reality is, you put Trevor Lawrence and the New England Patriots offense, we'll probably have a different story about Trevor Lawrence. That's not how things worked out. So, this scenario for Kenny Pickett, I wouldn't say is as dire as what, Malik Willis would be dealing with the Carolina Panthers, but it's pretty darn close. I mean, I'm not going to say the coverage bare, but there's not a whole lot to work with there in Atlanta right now. They've had offensive line issues, so the weight of the world's going to be put on his shoulders, and I don't think he's going to have as much help as Malik Willis would with the Carolina Panthers. So outside of Arthur Smith being the head coach, an offensive-minded guy, and he may be working to a system that plays to the strengths of Kenny Pickett, that's about all this spot has going for him. It's a tough spot for Kenny Pickett to be in here.
Yeah, old Kenny Two Gloves. It's going to be a tough spot for him. And see, here's the problem. This quarterback class has taken a lot of criticism, and I think it's pretty wide. Like, we all agree they all need to be in the right system, surrounded with better talent. And now where they're starting to creep up, because it wasn't that long ago, they were all kind of going in the late teens on some better franchises, much like Mac Jones, where he got selected to the Patriots. Now that they're starting to creep up in the top 10, I get even more concerned about him, because you're right, Brady. This roster isn't great. I mean, it was Kyle Pitts going to be his best weapon as a tight end, who's a good weapon, but what else are they going to put around him? The running back's position isn't great. That's my concern. I also think, too, clearly Kenny Pickett has the most polished tape. It was very clean this past season, even though it did kind of burst on the scene after an entire career at Pitt that was very pedestrian. He did have an incredible season, similar to Joe Burrow, played a lot less than had his breakout season. But I just feel like the ceiling is probably Andy Dalton-ish, which is good. Andy Dalton had a really, really nice career in Cincinnati. He made a lot of playoff runs, but there was always looking for more. And I wonder if that's what will be the kind of the MO or the reputation that Kenny Pickett gets after a while in the league is, man, we just need a little bit more out of our quarterback. I like him. He's going to make a nice living playing in the NFL. I just don't know if I see him being a Pro Bowl type player.
Ryan, weigh in here.
I'm laughing because John Breach is the only person that supports Andy Dalton, and now Danny had to bring him up. But I don't think you're wrong. I've actually talked about Daniel Jones as being a comp for Kenny Pickett, being thrown into a situation where the expectations are through the roof, and the next thing you know, everyone's down on Daniel Jones. It's not entirely Daniel Jones' fault. If Daniel Jones goes to the top of the second round, everyone's like, oh, okay, that's what we expected. And I think sometimes, as you note, Danny, we're putting too much expectations on these kids, especially if they go in the top 10.
All right, let's go to the Seahawks. Another team that could use a quarterback at 9. Matt Corral is still out there. Ryan, he is your QB1, but you are going in a different direction here for the Seahawks.
Yeah, if the Seahawks are going to roll with Drew Lock, then, the theme continues as we talk about these guys. You got to protect them. And Stone Forsythe, who I liked last year coming out of Florida, is basically the only guy on the roster that can play at the tackle position. And I don't know if you want to roll with him. He didn't play a lot last year, so I'm going with Charles Cross, who came from Mississippi State. Mike Leach had a fantastic season. The issue sometimes are, can he run block? If you watch Mississippi State play, even in that Mike Leach air raid offense, he can run block very well. He will get an opportunity to do that in Seattle, because we know that Pete Carroll's going to run the ball no matter what. And I think Charles Cross would be a good fit to build around whoever the long-term quarterback is going to be. And if it's this year for Drew Lock, protect him, which is something he needs in order to show he can actually play at this level consistently.
All right, light up the warning signs at 10. We do have a trade going down in this mock draft. The Jets have this pick, but Ryan has the Chiefs sending 29 and 30. They get one of those picks in part because they sent Tyreek Hill away. Instead, they will get 10 and 146 belonging to the Jets. Ryan Wilson, tell us what you now have the Chiefs doing at 10.
Amanda, they're drafting a quarterback. They're not drafting a quarterback. They're taking a wide receiver. They need a wide receiver. Look, man, they traded Tyreek Hill. Nothing's off the table, apparently. But they need a wide receiver. And there have been reports today that the Chiefs are actually thinking about trying to trade for a wide receiver for the draft. We'll see how that unfolds. But I haven't taken Garrett Wilson, who to me is the most explosive player in this draft at the wide receiver position and the most NFL ready to come in there. And he's not going to do what Tyreek Hill did. I sort of comp him to Odell Beckham to have that sort of athleticism and that sort of impact. And in that offense, it should be a pretty easy transition. We're not asking him to come in to an offense with no quarterback and no offensive line. He's going to one of the best destinations you go to as a wide receiver. So they have Juju Smith-Schuster. They have Marquez Valdez-Scantling, who they signed. They have Mecole Hardman. But they need a Tyreek-esque sort of replacement. Garrett Wilson will not be able to do it by himself, but I think he can get you there a long way. And if you're going to stay there at 29 or 30, your best case scenario is that Jameson Williams falls because of the ACL injury. But if he's gone, there'll be five other wide receivers also gone at that point, and you will have nothing in terms of replacing the cupboard at wide receiver after trading Tyreek to Miami.
See, I kind of see this as a reach for the Chiefs. I don't know that they need to trade away all the draft capital they just accumulated. Brett Veach has done a good job of stacking them. Let's not forget, too, Tyreek Hill was drafted in the 5th round, so they can find value there for some of these wide receivers, either in later rounds to help replace that. They've signed Marquez Valdez-Scantling. They've signed Juju Smith-Schuster. Mecole Hardman's obviously going to have a more expanded role. And then whatever else they would find potentially in the back end of the first round. You know, a lot of teams like to have those picks where they're stacked with one another because they really control the back end of the first round. And even if they want to accumulate more picks, which they may need to do. I mean, one of the reasons why they got rid of Tyreek Hill to accumulate more draft picks is they want to make sure that they're good with the salary cap right now. Everyone else in that division is signing away guys left and right, paying out a bunch of cash. They're helping themselves to get in a solid salary cap space. So 2-3 years from now, while everyone else is trying to kick the can down the road, they're just continuing to build around Patrick Mahomes through the draft. So I think this is a bit of a reach. I don't know that I foresee the Chiefs trading up this far to take a wide receiver.
Hey, it's our first trade. It's fun talking about it, though. Recapping 1 through 10 there, we saw our first 2 quarterbacks go off the board. First, Malik Willis to the Panthers at 6, Kenny Pickett to the Falcons at 8, and the trade that Brady isn't too keen on right now, the Chiefs trading away their 2 picks in the bottom of the first round to try to start filling that massive hole left behind by Tyreek Hill. Let's pick it up at 11, and another wide receiver off the board. USC's Drake London to the Commanders. Brady, Quinn, what you think?
Is this a need, Ryan? I mean, I kind of look at the roster. They got Terry McLaurin. They drafted Dwamie Brown. Curtis Samuel's there, too. They've had some other guys step up. Matt Corral's still sitting there, and I don't know how we feel about Carson Wentz. I mean, do we feel like Carson Wentz is their quarterback of the future, or is he a bridge quarterback? And maybe even Washington's curious to see what he's going to bring. Maybe I'm in the minority in this case. I think this is a deep wide receiver class. I don't think they have any of the absolute stars like a Justin Jefferson or a Jamar Chase, but I think this group is as good as there is. You can find value in the first round, second round, third round, fourth round, guys who are going to impact these rosters. So to me, I think if you've got a quarterback there you like and a guy like Matt Corral, for example, maybe like Sam Howell, who didn't play too far away, Desmond Ridder, who we've talked about, and I think both Ryan, you and I would agree, he's kind of risen up the ranks here. I could see that maybe more so than a wide receiver, at least at this point. It seems a little rich, although Drake London was a heck of a player.
Brady, I'm with you. Here's the thing, though. Ron Rivera keeps talking up Carson Wentz. They gave up 2 third-round picks for him. That feels like more than a 1-year deal, although we thought the same thing last year with the Colts. So I would take a quarterback here for sure all day long, but the Washington seems to be willing to go in a different direction. I love Drake London. Terry McLaurin has 1 year left in his deal. Dwamie Brown hasn't quite turned it on yet, only 1 year in the league, so that could certainly change. And Curtis Samuel was hurt for much of last season, so at least give Carson Wentz some weapons so he has one fewer excuse to use when he ends up on another roster a year from now. But that's the only reason I went in that direction. I would love to give them Matt Corral at this point, but Ron Rivera feels like the Carson Wentz is his guy, at least for now.
Let's go to the Vikings at 12. Ryan has them taking Washington cornerback Trent McDuffie. Danny, what are your thoughts on this? A little help for the secondary.
So I thought it was a little bit high, but you look at need, and I think that's where you go with it and try to find the best available. He's not the biggest defensive back out there at 5'11". If you guys know me, I love the length. I love guys that are longer. That seems to be the trend. Taller wide receivers, longer guys. But despite his size, he's got the speed to absolutely go with anybody out there at 4.4. Ran that at the combine. He's got great coverage skills. He's good enough to play press man against anybody. He also has showcased some pretty good route recognition when he does play zone coverage. The other thing that's a little bit concerning to me, and this I think is, when you're dealing with every Pac-12 player, is a shortened season 2 years ago with COVID, only played a handful of games. And then the level of competition, I know Drake London's in the Pac-12, but there's not exactly a slew of tape of him going against top-tier wide receivers in the Pac-12. So a little bit concerning. There's not that type of film out there against the top-tier players. But as a 3-year starter, there's plenty out there to see him. So I would just wish he was a little bit taller. But hey, you got to go with what you got, right?
Let's go back to the Texans at 13. This pick part of the Deshaun Watson trade to the Browns. Ryan, you have them taking Jermaine Johnson. Spent the past season at Florida State, but things really just got better for him as the year rolled along.
By the way, as someone who's the same size as Trent McDuffie, I can't make myself taller. I would love to make myself taller. I'd love to make my hair grow. That ain't going to happen, man. It is what it is. So Trent McDuffie's doing pretty good for what he's got, I guess. Jermaine Johnson, he's plenty tall. So he's as tall as Brady and Danny, and he's doing okay for himself. Left Georgia to go to Florida State, as you mentioned, Amanda, and just set the world on fire. And I say it every time we talk about him. He had a chip on his shoulder about playing in the ACC. Danny talked about the Pac-12 not being elite competition. Jermaine Johnson seemed to have that same feeling about the ACC after coming from the SEC, but he dominated there. He dominated the Senior Bowl, had a great combine, and I think if you're the Texans, you get Ike Ekwonu and Jermaine Johnson with 3 and 13. You have to feel pretty good about where this team is headed, given how much was going on in just terms of the craziness trying to Deshaun Watson and the lack of winning football games last year. So this is a step in the right direction with these 2 first-round picks. And Jermaine Johnson, as we like to say, made himself a lot of money based on his performance not only during the season, but at the Senior Bowl and the Combine.
Let's go to the Ravens at 14, and this is where we finally find Oregon's Kayvon Thibodeau. Ryan, I want to start with you because, for so long, once upon a time, we were like, this is the guy. This is the number 1 overall guy. Here he is at 14. What's going on?
No, it's crazy, and it has nothing to do with on the field for the most part. And I don't like sort of talking about rumors this time of year because a lot of it's smoke screening, but it's not rumors. So I've been talking to teams that have been telling me this, that there's some concerns about whether you can coach him up hard. I've heard concerns that he doesn't work hard all the time, and sometimes he takes plays off. And, again, if the draft were in January, perhaps this is different. But when you keep hearing something, you have to start believing it. And when teams are telling you this directly, you have to start believing it. So I think there's a concern out there about that. If you watch him play, he's lights out, and he's lights out most of the time. I think the concerns are maybe outside of the football in terms of the practice and again, being able to be coached hard or whatever you want to call it. So we'll see how this sorts itself out. It feels like he's going to fall outside of the top 5. That doesn't mean he's not a top 5 talent based on what he's done on the field, but it's been a curious conversation about Kayvon Thibodeau going back to the end of the season, and you keep hearing it, and that's why I hesitantly bring it up, but bring it up nonetheless.
Ryan, I think he's done himself a disservice by the way he's handled some of his interviews. I mean, go back to the championship game. He was sitting down with Fox, and he talked about, hey, I didn't want to go to Bama because I didn't want to win national championships. I wanted to build a brand. You talk about scaring off NFL GMs. If you're more worried about building a brand than winning championships, then why are you playing the game? So I think, you talk about rumors, what people think about him. The more he talks, it's like he hasn't been coached up very well. Because I get people, everyone wants to build a brand, but you should be all you should be talking about is what a great football player you want to be. But he's mercurial. He wants to go out there and build something else outside of football, which is okay. But I think that's scaring off a lot of teams.
Look, Baltimore took Odafe Owe in the first round last year, and he showed signs of what could be a really good edge rusher in this league for a long period of time. It would make a lot of sense. And I think they'd be ecstatic if they could get Kayvon Thibodeau in this spot, given his upside and ability that he showed on tape. And this is a defense, too, that struggled to be able to get a consistent pass rush at times last year, with the exception of Owe. And their defensive front needs a lot of work. So this would be a huge get for Baltimore if they didn't have to move up to take Thibodeau at this spot. Baltimore typically likes to draft defense in the first round when you go through their draft history. Granted, last year I believe they took Rashad Bateman in the first round, but for the most part, they love to take first-round defensive players because they usually make an immediate impact. So it makes a lot of sense here. I think they would be extremely happy with this pick if he fell in their lap.
It is time for the Eagles portion of the draft. 3 picks between 15 and 20. Danny, we'll go to you first. With 15, Ryan has them taking Utah linebacker Devin Lloyd.
Man, I tell you what, Amanda, this might be one of my favorite players in the draft. And, ever since Ryan had him on here, he crept in the first round, one of the earlier ones in the college football season. I think he started at 31 in the first round. And then you started going to watch him week in, week out. And just every time you popped in a tape of Utah, he just jumped off the film. Like you would see him around the football almost all the time. As an inside linebacker, he's got a high IQ. He can cover sideline to sideline. A little bit worried about his overall size at 6'3", 235. Could he get overwhelmed by some teams trying to cram it down his throat? Maybe, but he's stood up pretty well against that. I think he will be able to add a couple pounds and not lose much of his speed. But I think you look at a complete football player and you find it in Devin Lloyd.
All right, let's stick with the Eagles at 16. Brady, Ryan staying on the defensive side of the ball. LSU cornerback Derek Stingley Jr.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about this countless times. It depends on what, Derek Stingley Jr. are getting. Is it the 2019 version or what we saw the past couple of years, which last year we obviously didn't get to see much due to injury, or maybe protecting himself for that opportunity to play in the NFL. Either way, he's an extreme talent. I think as far as his upside goes, he's right up there next to Ahmad Gardner. The only difference is Ahmad played this past year. I kind of give him a little more of the benefit of the doubt. But Stingley's got all the talent and ability. Clearly, as you can see, the Eagles really going after defensive players. That's the side of the football need to revamp and get going again to try to make another playoff run. So I like the pick, Ryan. Well done.
We're going to take a little quick break from the Eagles. We're going to go to the Chargers at 17. Chargers fans can come back to the TV. Danny, Ryan has them taking Georgia's Jordan Davis. I believe I've heard it here multiple times, 341 pounds, but runs like he's 275.
Yeah, and that 341 was a very crisp, clean 341 because he has played as high as 360. Like, he's fluctuates, right? But I think the big question mark was, how does he handle the weight? And he shows up on film and makes plays, but I think he erased any issues when he showed up at the combine and ran that 4.78. I mean, that was pretty jaw-dropping, him showcasing his quickness, his ability to move at that size. Just a player, you talk about building from the interior. He takes up multiple blockers almost every time he was on the field at Georgia. A big reason there. I was a little bit worried that maybe he was just, this lovable big teddy bear guy who's mammoth, but the play wouldn't back it up. But the more you look at him, the more you pop in the tape, he was getting double teamed a lot, consumed a lot of players. I think he's really going to be a critical force in the inside. And if it's in Los Angeles with the Chargers, I think it's an absolute great fit. And my favorite part about him, Amanda, hopefully you can appreciate this. I don't know if Brady and Ryan can. I am a massive fan of Swedish fish, so much my wife gets mad at me because I buy them every time I go by a gas station. He eats them by the bag, like 8-pound bags, just pops in Swedish fish. He can handle it. I don't know if I can, but that's my favorite little nugget about him.
Sounds like a sponsorship opportunity coming on.
Yeah, that'd be great. Not for Danny, but for him. No, not for you. You're apparently already eating a Swedish fish or very good, Danny. All right, let's go to the Saints at 18. Ryan, no more Teron Armstead officially off to Miami. You have them taking Central Michigan's Bernard Rayman for protecting Jameis Winston, of course, coming off that ACL injury.
That's right. First of all, hard pass on the Swedish fish. That's just not my thing. But in terms of Bernard Raymond, no, come on. Give me some candy corn and then we can talk. Bernard Raymond out of Central Michigan. I just threw that bomb and walked away. So out of Central Michigan. He's only been playing left tackle for a couple years. I like him more than a lot of people, including some people in the league, and I get that. But he's so incredibly raw. But he's going to be a lot better. He was a tight end originally. He's only been playing football for a short while. He's originally from Austria, and he has the tools to be really good. And you talk to scouts, the improvements he made not only from 2020 to 2021, but during the 21 season were noteworthy. And you talk about Teron Armstead leaving, Amanda, to go to Miami. If you're going to have Jameis there coming off that ACL injury and no left tackle to speak of, it might make sense to take one here. Quarterback could be a consideration for sure, even wide receiver, but it feels like offensive line is more important to protect Jameis, who seems like he's going to be the guy at least this year and maybe even next year in New Orleans.
I mean, candy corn? I mean, literally, it's only good like one time a year. Tell me you don't eat candy corn out of season, Ryan.
I'm eating in between commercial breaks right now, Brady.
I mean, I will say I eat Peeps, so it's okay. The little,
and when it's
the
not
Easter
Easter?
ones?
Well, it's almost Easter. That makes sense.
Yeah, I know, but I mean, they're disgusting, but I still partake. All right, let's go back to the Eagles. Either they're drinking their Yingling, celebrating, or they've been yelling on social media. They're now back at 19. We're going to move to the other side of the ball. Ryan has them taking Alabama wide receiver who did deal with the injury, Jamison Williams. Brady, what do you think about this?
I mean, I think they might as well take their wide receiver group and try to qualify them for the Olympics. I mean, it's a lot of speed when you look at Devontae Smith, Jalen Reagor, who I know hasn't panned out the way they thought he would, still blessed with a ton of speed and ability, and Quez Watkins. You add Jamison Williams to this group, I mean, the sky's the limit. It comes down to really Jalen Hurts and whether or not he can deliver and continue to evolve as a quarterback playing from the pocket. But don't forget either, Nick Sirianni really came along as a wide receiver coach before, elevating himself up to eventually a head coaching position. So could make a lot of sense from that standpoint. You address the defense with your first 2 picks in Devin Lloyd and then Derek Stingley. Now you've got a big-time playmaker, and it's all about big plays. So wouldn't be shocked if they didn't do this. If they feel confident, he'll be able to come back and be the same player we saw before the ACL tear.
Let's go to the Steelers at 20. No more Juju, no more James Washington. Ryan has them starting to fill that position with Arkansas's Treylon Burks. We are going to go to the Swedish Fish King for this one. Danny?
Let's go. I remember we were doing combine coverage, and I was on with Brady and Ryan, and we were talking about all these receivers running 4.3s, incredible speed. And Ryan said, what about Treylon Burks? He ran a 4.55. Are you worried about it? So I was like, uh-oh, I need to go back. So I go back and I watch more tape of him at Arkansas. And, you want to be able to impress with your speed, your flat-out track speed. But what I noticed about him was football speed. So I'm not as worried as some people may be that he didn't go down there because of his size. He's 6'2", 225. He is a thick, big-bodied, strong wide receiver with massive hands who catches everything thrown in his direction. And I think it does matter. Arkansas moved him around, got creative with him. I've kind of said, he could be like Deebo Samuel type player, the 49ers, the way they've used him. I do think system matters. Will they get into a system that's creative with him, even move him into the backfield at times? But I love him just as a football player, almost one of those players you don't even want to put and peg just as a wide receiver. Get the ball in his hands and watch him make plays, and I think he'll have a really successful transition from Arkansas to the next level.
I'm about to hop off set. Chris is going to come on here. Your disgusting candy that you like, you have to tell us. And it can't be like some protein shake or something.
I don't really, I mean, if I,
See,
if
I know,
hold on. If we're talking about that sort of stuff, like Werther's Originals, like old school candy, that would.
80 years old, Brady Quinn. Let's recap 11 through 20 here. We found out way too much information about our candy takes here. The fall of Kayvon Thibodeau going to the Ravens at 14. Ryan says, look, all honesty, I really don't think he's going to be there. Eagles, you can see their 3 picks in this section.
The Patriots at number 21 going with a cornerback, Andrew Booth Jr. Ryan, a replacement of sorts for J.C. Jackson.
Yeah, those are big shoes to fill for sure, Chris. But Andrew Booth has sort of gotten lost in the mix when we talk about Sauce Gardner and Derek Stingley. He had a fantastic season at Clemson, and I think he very much deserves to be considered a top 20 pick. So it makes sense that the Patriots would think about him here. You mentioned J.C. Jackson. They had to sign Malcolm Butler. They signed Terrence Mitchell. So they don't have a lot of depth at the position. Joeyn Williams, their former day 2 pick, hasn't quite panned out yet. He only has 1 more year left in his deal to prove himself. And they have a lot of holes to fill. So I think it would make a lot of sense here at 21 to target a cornerback, especially since you didn't do a lot of that in free agency outside of the aforementioned Butler and Mitchell. And Butler hasn't played a lot of football in recent years. And, of course, the last time he was in New England, he was benched for reasons that remain a mystery. So Andrew Booth, great season. Seems like a good fit here for New England.
Okay, let's move to the Packers at number 22. And Aaron Rodgers getting a wide receiver here in Chris Olave out of Ohio State, Brady.
Yeah, I wonder if he's actually going to be in the war room sitting next to Brian Gutekunst helping them make this pick, considering they haven't done it in 2 decades. And obviously he signs the contract, comes back, and then Devontae Adams is traded away. So it makes all the sense in the world. You just wonder if they're actually going to pull the trigger and do it. Now, Chris Olave would be the next best wide receiver up. You look at his overall top-end speed. He's a blazer. He's got tremendous hands and body control. Not the biggest guy, but I'll tell you what, man, on the outside of the perimeter, go check out the tape. He's blocking his tail off. He's running downfield to help out teammates. You never see him loafing or lagging in his routes or even running to clear something out for Garrett Wilson or Jackson Smith in Jigba. So it makes all the sense in the world. It's just whether or not the Packers are going to actually pull the trigger and do this. For the love of God, please get Aaron Rodgers some help at the wide receiver position.
Or else you're going to have a disgruntled quarterback once again. And the very next pick, the Arizona Cardinals, who have had somewhat of a disgruntled quarterback there as well. But Kyler Murray getting some help here in offensive tackle Kenyon Green out of Texas A&M, Danny.
Yeah, he's a stud. Chris, I think he'll probably be more of a guard at the next level, 6'4", not, tall like some of the tackles that we're seeing come out at 6'6". His body frame, more of a guard type player that played at Texas A&M. The one thing about Jimbo Fisher's system, and we talk about it all the time from the quarterback's perspective, it is more of an NFL-style system. So even as a offensive lineman, you're definitely used to more terminology, some run-blocking schemes that you will be able to transition to the next level. So Kenyon Green, I think, is a player that really would be able to build on that foundation that Jimbo built there in College Station. He's an exceptional run blocker, needs to get a little bit better in the pass game. Again, that's why I think he's better built as a guard because you can kind of hide that somewhat. But his run blocking capabilities, to me, says he could have a really nice NFL career making that transition.
Got to protect Kyler better if he's going to stay there. A lot of it is him getting out into the open space, but at the end of the season, he's been banged up the last couple of years. Let's move to the Cowboys at 24. And Ryan, this is where Tyler Linderbaum goes. A lot of your mocks, I would say a month or two ago, had him going top 15, sometimes even top 10, but you have him sliding now to the mid-20s.
Yeah, this has been a pretty popular pairing in recent weeks just because it seems to make a lot of sense. Tyler Biadasz out of Wisconsin has been good but not great, and if you have an opportunity to replace the center of that offensive line with someone like Tyler Linderbaum, who at the end of the day could end up being the best offensive lineman in this draft class 10, 15 years from now, I think you have to take that opportunity. Certainly Jerry Jones understands the situation in Dallas. The window isn't necessarily closing, but they've certainly come up short of expectations. That last playoff loss being a stingy reminder of that. And I think the better you can get along the offensive line to protect Dak Prescott, to help that running game in Zeke Elliott, all the better for that offense in general. You could go defensive line here. They need help there as well. They lost Randy Gregory, of course. You could go wide receiver. They have some needs there. But I think if Linderbaum feels about this is where he's going to come off the board, this is where all the good centers in the last decade or so, the Marquise Pouncey's, the Brian Kelly's have come off the board right around 18. So this wouldn't be a surprise for me to see Tyler go to Dallas here.
And you have another interior lineman going next up to the Bills at 25. Zion Johnson out of Boston College, Danny. Great Senior Bowl, and he can play every position on that line.
He can, and I think he really benefited his pass protection, which was one of his weaknesses from playing tackle at BC back in 2020. But he's a two-time captain, a player that, along the offensive line is vocal enough. He's a smart player. He's going to be able to pick up any scheme. The 6'3" height is probably why I think he translates in the interior. Again, another guard, I think, at this point in the draft where he'll be able to make that transition. A little bit of a unique stance if you watch him play, but it doesn't matter. It still gets the job done. So I think this will be a really solid selection.
Bills are the favorites to win the Super Bowl here in the offseason. Let's go to the Titans at number 26, who had the number 1 seed in the AFC going into last season. It's Nakobe Dean out of Georgia.
Yeah, I got to ask you, Ryan, what was the thought process here? I mean, are you channeling John Robinson? Do you know something we don't know? I mean, they've got David Long, Zach Cunningham under contract. They did draft Monty Rice last year, I believe, in the 3rd round. So they do have some guys there in the interior. Is this just best player available? What are you thinking here?
Well, Rashaan Evans is a free agent. He's probably going to sign somewhere else. And I think you have some good players, the names you mentioned. You have a chance for a great player, an incredibly smart player to coordinate up that defense. The defense was not good 2 years ago, got better last year. Certainly helped with the edge rush, Bud Dupree, that addition, and Harold Landry doing what he did. So I like the idea of Nakobe Dean in the middle of that defense. You have some off-ball guys that can play, but can they play at the level of Nakobe Dean with that consistency? I don't think so. Offensive line is obviously a huge need here too, Brady, and you could even argue quarterback if you're not on the Ryan Tannehill train. But I just love Nakobe Dean almost as much as Devin Lloyd. They're 1 and 1A for me. He just slid down here because of some of the other needs the teams wanted to fill between the Devin Lloyd pick and where we are now.
You hit the nail on the head. I was going to say potential quarterback. Matt Corral still on the board here. Desmond Ridder, Sam Howell, some of the others we've just kind of talked about, depending on how teams view them. Or a guy like Trevor Penning, who, if you look at the right tackle position, that's open right now. Quisbury is a free agent, so that would be the area that I might look at if I'm the Tennessee Titans, probably before interior linebacker. But again, sometimes you'll see teams take best player available, and you can make that case for Nakobe Dean.
And there's another Georgia player coming up next here at number 27, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in Ryan Wilson's draft, taking defensive tackle Devontae Wyatt. Ryan, this is a back-to-back Georgia players here. Why Wyatt?
Yeah, I don't know if he's the forgotten man along that Georgia defensive line. They're all pretty well known at this point. But again, another guy who had a fantastic season, plays more three technique. We talked earlier about Travon Walker playing just about anywhere you want him to do. Vita Vea is still there. That's your guy. Ndamukong Suh's a free agent. And you need some depth along that interior defensive line to get that defense back to what it was a few years ago. They struggled last year at times with injuries. And I think Devonta Wyatt comes in right away and not only gives you that depth, but he can play a number of snaps and help you out from day one.
All right, let's move on to the Packers again at number 28. They took their wide receiver, so now this is where Ryan has them going with Trevor Penning. And Ryan said, Brady, that in 4 weeks when we get the draft, he could see Penning going top half of this first round.
Yeah, there's a chance of that for sure. It seems like there's a lot of growing momentum for Trevor Penning, his attitude, everything else that you saw on display at the Senior Bowl. But this draft's all about Aaron Rodgers. All right, we got Chris Olave with the first pick. Now we get a right tackle to replace Dennis Kelly, who's a free agent, with the next pick in the first round. Makes all the sense in the world. Solid player, makes sense in this particular spot too. And he's got that sort of aggressiveness and the run blocking that Matt LaFleur wants to incorporate too as part of this offense. So it makes a lot of sense, Ryan.
All right, let's recap the picks here. 21 through 28 as we continue to roll through Ryan Wilson's latest mock draft and a couple of Packers picks here. Penning just there, the offensive lineman out of Northern Iowa, an FCS school, and Chris Olave at 22. Finally, Packers getting a wide receiver, but unfortunately they're only getting wide receivers in mock drafts the last few years, not actual drafts, at least not high up in the draft. All right, Ryan Wilson spicing up his life because he has a mock draft in this latest, mock trade rather, in this latest mock draft with the Jets trading back out of that 10 spot so the Chiefs can go up and get a wide receiver. The Jets have back-to-back picks here at 29 and 30. Let's get to it with Ryan Wilson, Brady Quinn, and Danny Kanell. Ryan, you have him going with an offensive tackle here, Tyler Smith out of Tulsa. Why here, despite admittedly having a second-round grade on him?
Yeah, he's popular. He's sort of gaining steam, Chris, and that's part of the reason I'm going here. Pete Prisco had him going in his first round last week for the same reason. I like him in round 2, but look, the Jets may feel differently. They got Ahmad Gardner at 4. Now they circle back. They get another offensive lineman that wasn't necessarily a huge need at 4, but certainly feels good here, and you're making life easier for Zach Wilson. So that's why I have him penciled in here at 29 in this mock trade that conceivably could never happen.
And then with the 30th pick, it's David Ojabo. Danny, a guy who tore his Achilles at his pro day.
Yeah, this was a bummer to me. I mean, you hate seeing this happen to a player, and now he's got to try to follow the Cam Akers timeline of 6 months, which is ridiculous. But I still think you can find value here at this spot. I mean, Aiden Hutchinson went number 1. And if you just look at the tape, assuming he makes a full recovery, I think the upside is really there for him to maybe have a more productive career as a pass rusher, not as a complete football player, but just getting after the quarterback. The one concern, he's only played 20 games at Michigan, but when he did, especially this last season, really started to jump off the film at you. And running 4.5 at the combine helped him too. Incredibly athletic. Just hope he makes a full recovery, and if he does, I think he'll be able to step in and be an impact player.
Aiden Hutchinson went first in this mock draft from Ryan Wilson, and now back-to-back Michigan players here as the Bengals go with safety Daxton Hill, a guy who might be able to play multiple spots.
Yeah, I think that's where the versatility comes in here, some value. He's got great tape, a solid player all the way around. It's not a huge need this year for the Bengals. They did franchise tag Jesse Bates, so this is one of those moves where you sometimes see teams draft a player that will eventually replace that player. And more teams are playing that big nickel with 3 safeties who are going to be on the field at all times. That would make a lot of sense to plug Daxton Hill in that particular spot here. So I like this pick for the Bengals.
And one more pick in the first round mock from Ryan Wilson. It's a doozy. It's the Lions going quarterback here at 32 with Matt Corral.
Oh, he can't leave his number 1 quarterback, now being taken in the first round. Come on now.
Yeah, Ryan, you got him number 1, baby. Why so low?
Yeah, I love Matt Corral. NFL teams like him too, but just the way that the board fell, and I feel like Malik Willis, Danny texted me and said Malik better go at 6 or there are going to be issues there. So that's why that happened. And then Kenny Pickett is obviously very popular, so he had to go a couple picks later. Honestly, Chris, I would take these guys probably 15 or later for being, and we've had this conversation about how they're not all worthy of being top 15 picks. But Matt Corral, for me, does it in terms of being QB1, and I think it's a good fit in Detroit. And the ironic thing is, of the teams we just talked about, the Panthers and the Falcons, the Lions might be best set up to support a quarterback going forward. He won't have to play next year because of Jared Goff, and that offensive line is actually pretty good.
Yeah, I agree with you. This might be a good fit for him to be able to sit out a year and get into this system where maybe you run the ball a little bit more. And the thing we don't know about him is what is he looking like in a system? I mean, he played in this RPO-heavy system at Ole Miss, throwing the ball around, spreading it down there, very collegiate feel to the system. But he still can make plays. I love his improvisational skills. I think he translates. I think this could be a player that we're talking about in a few years saying, man, were we too down on Matt Corral coming out of Ole Miss?
I just want to know if he's going to bite off some kneecaps. I mean, isn't that what Dan Campbell's looking for?
Going to have to, yeah.
You're right. He's going to have to.
That's one of the questions they asked him at the combine. Is like, look, do you like the taste of kneecaps? And he must have said yes, because that's what Ryan has.
Well, yeah, that's what went into this pick, clearly. You know what I like about this pick is Ryan's, got what really a lot of teams are doing in this position. When you have the 32nd pick, you're looking to have that fifth-year option, and in particular for some of what DK talked about. He doesn't have to go in and play right away. You can sit for a year or two behind Jared Goff, depending on how that plays out. Sit and learn it, and you're not worried about him, wasting time necessarily. It could be good for him. He could end up coming into the best situation, not having to play right away and transitioning into the NFL. So the kneecap thing is going to have to develop maybe an appetite for it.
Kneecaps, good. Matt Corral, 32 to the Lions. That's 3 quarterbacks in the first round. He also had Malik Willis, 6 to the Panthers. Kenny Pickett to the Falcons in that top 10 as well. Our thanks to Ryan Wilson. You can see the whole mock on CBSSports.com. Our thanks to Danny Kanell and Brady Quinn as well.
What's for dinner? Kneecaps? Is that what you're having for dinner tonight?
For my dog, yes. Loves those kneecaps.
Swedish fish for dessert.
All right. Fellas, thanks.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.